Before we dive into the hottest news topics, if you love Flash Drive, make sure you're following us on Spotify and Apple to know as soon as any new content drops.
Christopher Michael Dawson on the charge that on or about 8 January 1982 at Bayview, you did murder Lynette Dawson. I find you guilty.
The long-awaited verdict in Chris Dawson's murder trial will have all the reaction.
Put simply, we're having a crack.
And he's brought up a ton. Anthony Albanese reflects on his first 100 days as PM. It would be rude for us not to do the same.
And this week, we had a gift, Flash Drivers, an absolute GIFT.
I thought it might be a fun moment to tell you that my brand new album comes out October 21st.
Sorry, what? Sorry, what? What?
You're still reeling.
I am still reeling. It is Taylor's World, J-Law. We're just lucky enough to be living in it right now. Apparently, there was a huge award show earlier this week. My takeaway, though, was that TS10 is coming, so naturally, we're going to have to fangirl about it. I'm Georgie.
And I'm James Law.
And this is Flash Drive. J-Law, I hope you know that huge milestone this week.
What's that?
30 episodes. It is Flash Drive's 30th birthday.
We made it.
Not 30 years.
Not quite Hey Hey It's Saturday levels yet.
Not quite, not quite. However, we are getting some big name feedback and some big name reviews, for instance.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before, unafraid to reference or not reference, put it in a blender, shit on it, vomit on it, eat it, give birth to it.
Lady Gaga's a fan. Did you know that she was a Flash driver?
It's the giving birth to it that I think we really did. It was around episode 20 where we really started to give birth to it.
I think so. I also love give reference, don't give reference.
Give
I was
reference.
like, yeah, that seems right. That seems right. Like, she obviously listens and
Yeah.
she's been able to gauge
Thank
what
you,
we
Gaga.
provide the world.
Yeah,
thank you,
thank you,
Gaga.
Gaga.
Thank you so much for that. So 30 episodes. I think this could be our best one yet, maybe.
I think so.
You think so?
Should we do it?
Let's do it. Let's get into it.
I'm a little bit emotional. After 40 years, my sister's been vindicated. This verdict is for Lynn. Today her name has been cleared. She loved her family and never left them of her own accord. Instead, her trust was betrayed by a man she loved.
It has been the story that's captivated the nation for the last 4 decades, in particular the last 5 years, I guess it's fair to say. And it reached a heart-stopping climax earlier this week. Former teacher and rugby league star Chris Dawson has been found guilty of murdering his first wife, Lynette Dawson, after a marathon verdict from Justice Ian Harrison.
I'm satisfied beyond reasonable doubt that the only rational inference that the circumstances enable me to draw is that Lynette Dawson died on about 8 January 1982 as the result of a conscious and voluntary act committed by Mr. Dawson with the intention of causing her death.
That was a huge moment, J-Law, and it was after a very, very long verdict.
More than 5 hours.
More than 5 hours. You and I listened to, I would say, pretty much every single second of that 5 hours. Just how massive has this investigation been, the trial itself been, and now this verdict? I know that you were a listener to The Teacher's Pet, from which we can owe, I would say, a lot of this trial, at least, to that true crime podcast.
I think so. So, yeah, I mean, it's been 40 years exactly since Lynn disappeared, and we now know without doubt that she was killed 40 years ago. And yeah, I don't think you can underestimate the significance of this, because I think it is a story of, like, journalism cops it a lot of the time, and for good reason a lot of the time, for, you know, picking over people's misery, for being trashy, for blowing stories out of proportion. But I think this is a case where journalism has really gone a long way to help bring justice to a family who, you know, was denied it for 4 decades. So this podcast from The Australian, The Teacher's Pet, was obviously a huge hit, but it went beyond just being a good story. It was really quite a piece of activist journalism where they were really trying to solve this case. And as Hedley Thomas, the Gold Walkley Award-winning journalist, as he dug deeper and deeper into this, he just became convinced that Chris Dawson was guilty of this crime, and now he's been vindicated. And there's been a lot of pressure and pushback against his motives and his techniques, but I think the result shows that what he did was dead on, and I think he deserves a lot of credit.
Well, and the family as well yesterday, Lynn's family, were very quick to just say thank you to Hedley Thomas. So I think that is very telling in itself. You're right. He spoke earlier today on Sky News, Hedley Thomas, and he said that when he started investigations, he was gravely suspicious. Those were his words on Chris Dawson and his role in the disappearance of his wife, Lynn. And then just as he continued his investigations and the podcast went on, it became that he was utterly convinced, 100% convinced, that Chris Dawson had killed Lynette and she hadn't abandoned her family, as was, I guess, the major storyline that was told by Dawson, but probably was also, I think, what I've learned just from the marathon verdict yesterday, that was kind of the line that was being sprouted by the investigators at the time. So I know we're talking 4 decades ago as well, but Hedley Thomas also said, it was a shoddy police investigation at the time that has now been able to be rectified. But it's been an incredible journey. What were your takeaways from Justice Harrison's presentation yesterday?
Yeah, well, he was very thorough, very methodical, dug into pretty much every detail that was brought up in the past 10-week trial.
Yeah. I think it may have, for people, because there's a lot of general interest about this case because of the podcast and because of how popular it was. So I think that having a judge-only trial may have surprised a few people with just the length and how much they were having to listen because, a jury trial, it's like 12 seconds, guilty, not guilty.
Exactly, yeah. It's very unusual to get this kind of detail before you hear the verdict. But I think for people who have watched this case, maybe not had a deep interest in it, I think, and a lot of people I've spoken to before the verdict came down were like, how could you convict him when there is no body? The prosecution did not really go into detail about how Lynn was killed or exactly when. They sort of said it was, this day or maybe the next. They left a lot of that detail out, and instead the strength of the case was around circumstantial evidence. And what the judge said that I thought was very interesting was that in a case like this, where it does rely on circumstantial evidence, you have to take that evidence as a whole. So there might be little holes in the case, little questions that aren't answered, but when you add up all these little bits of evidence, little bits of testimony, little different eyewitness accounts, it tells a story. And I think that any logical person who maybe listened to the podcast or listened to the 10-week trial, I think the only logical conclusion you can draw is that Dawson killed his wife because it doesn't make sense in any other way you look at it. Like, where did she go?
Yeah, where did she go? That was interesting. I found,
where did she go?
Where did she go? And if she did go somewhere, how did she facilitate that?
Yeah.
I found that interesting. That was a point that Justice Harrison really drove home for me, was that, well, she didn't take any money with her. She didn't have the financial means just to leave, let alone start a new life completely.
Couldn't drive.
Couldn't drive.
She didn't bring any clothes.
Yes.
She didn't bring her contact lenses. So there she is, taking the bus, no clothes, no money.
Yeah.
Like it does not bear up to any kind of scrutiny. And the judge also really early on in his reasonings said, which was one of the real bombshell conclusions he drew, was that all of the supposed sightings of Lynn after she disappeared were all rubbish. He threw them all out. And also that Chris maintained that he was in phone contact with Lynn, that she would call from time to time in about the year after she disappeared. And the judge said that those were lies. He just could not substantiate any of it. So then we're starting to get into guilty territory.
Were you surprised when the verdict came down that it was guilty? Because, as we've said, 5 hours, long time. I think it started out and you and I were both like, this could be a guilty verdict. And then as the judge continued on and on and on, we were like, oh, maybe there's some doubt now, before it was just seemed to wrap up suddenly all at once. It was like, bam, actually, no, guilty, official.
I know, right? Yeah, it was a real roller coaster ride. Because, yes, in his beginning address, it did very much seem like Dawson was going down. But then as he got deeper into all of because he pretty much examined every piece of evidence heard in those 10 weeks. So that's why it took so long. And he'd explain, okay, the Crown said this, the defence said that, this is my conclusion. And so it took forever to get through all of that. And in the second half, there was a lot of things that he struck out. So a lot of Lynn's friends' evidence he didn't find credible. So a lot of these women who were friends with Lynn at the time, back in the 80s, gave evidence about Dawson's threatening behaviour towards Lynn. One of her friends, or maybe a co-worker, said that he choked her and that she saw bruises, and the judge just did not find a lot of that believable. Yeah. So a lot of that stuff got thrown out, and you're like, oh, well, like that removes a lot of like the picture that the Crown was trying to paint of who Chris was as a kind of threatening, overbearing husband.
And I think now we're only in this position because of the journalism that Hedley Thomas was able to investigate, put out there, deliver in this podcast of The Teacher's Pet. And he spoke after the verdict.
I feel like I've even got to know Lynn, although I could never have known her. You know, I was, I guess, 16 when she disappeared, but her story struck me as so unjust, so unfair at the time. And, you know, I think it's true, I did become obsessive about it. And let's remember, it's taken 40 years for this to happen. Chris Dawson should have been charged 40 years ago. He has had 40 years of his life that he has been able to enjoy without any accountability for what's happened.
Hedley Thomas speaking after the verdict, standing alongside the family, Lynn's family, yesterday. What do you make of the podcast realm and what it has done for investigative journalism?
Well, it's really interesting. So before this trial, Chris Dawson took his case to the High Court of Australia and tried to argue that the case should not proceed ever because the podcast has forever prejudiced him.
Yes.
Eventually that was rejected, but a judge along the way was quite scathing towards Hedley Thomas and the podcast, saying that his investigation has influenced witnesses and kind of biased them against Dawson, and that a lot of people's reasons for coming forward are tainted. I hear that judge's argument, but I reject it.
I hear it, I raise your sword, I get rid
and
of
I
it.
reject it. Because journalism shouldn't, fit with court standards, right? We're here to tell stories, we're here to find things out, and oftentimes it is in courts, cops, and institutions' interests to try to shut down any questions that come from journalists. In fact, nowadays, they're very, very good at it, at shutting journos out, at not allowing them and trying to just discredit any lines of inquiry that they don't like. And, I have to praise Hedley Thomas for just continuing with this and being a dog with a bone with it. I think that the success of this can't all be put on his shoulders, and I think he would be the first to say that. There's been a lot of police who've done a lot of work over decades to get this result. But what the podcast did was shine a light on it, not allow the cops to drop it, and keep the pressure on them to build their case and not let it go. Yeah. What do you think? Do you think that there is a case in which podcasts like this can taint prosecutions.
For sure, for sure. However, I think that even the judge in this trial, he made mention of that too, saying that some of the evidence that maybe he did throw out, he wasn't able to see it as possibly as justifiable as it was because of that slant of being tainted or biased because of the Teacher's Pet podcast and Hedley Thomas's investigations or connections to Hedley Thomas. So I can see that. But by the same token, I remember asking when we did a special on a couple of profiles on some families of missing persons during Missing Persons Week this year. And I remember asking the families directly, what do you make of true crime podcasts like this? And for instance, if they were made about their missing loved ones, what they made of that, because yes, it could lead to answers, but it was also entertainment for so many people. And both the families we spoke to, they were for it because they would just hold answers, any kind of answer above all else. Like at least with Lynn's family now, they have answers, but they also have a conviction. They have a sentence coming. So there can be that retribution, maybe that sense of justice. But for people whose families are still missing, I think they just want people to care about it. And the only way that can happen sometimes is with these true crime podcasts, the work of Hedley Thomas, the work of Rachel Brown and the Trace series. Like these avenues wouldn't be being explored if they didn't exist.
I think so. And also what's interesting, I think, from what Hedley had to say outside court, so he said that, you know, this was allowed to happen. He was allowed to live his life for 40 years after he had killed his wife without any accountability. Hedley has done a couple of interviews since those comments, and what he said is that something like this wouldn't happen today. I think it's important to think back to the 80s, and I think the cops just dismissed this as a runaway wife. She just ran away, and there wasn't any kind of need to look into it. If that happened today, I feel like no one, not just journalism, but no one would just allow that. They'd be like, hang on, this is sus as. I think we know now that, like, there's a missing wife, you look at the husband.
Right? It's not a hop, skip and a jump to look at the spouse.
So I think it does reflect how far we've come as a nation in the past sort of 40 years. And I think it's true that this probably wouldn't happen again today, and that you wouldn't just take the husband's word for it because he's the man of the house.
Well, Hedley and Lynn's family believe that this is the second last chapter of this story. There's still one huge part missing for them, and that is the recovery of Lynn's body. So let's leave the final word to Hedley Thomas after his extensive investigation and just see what he thinks might be the next step.
Chris Dawson might tell if he thinks that he can get out of prison in time to have a few years of freedom before he dies. But I suspect that unless there is something like that on offer, he will go to his grave not disclosing it.
Georgie, let's return to our favourite topic here at Flash Drive.
Yes.
Australian politics.
Oh,
we know everybody loves it.
It is our favourite.
Yeah, because we're not the only ones celebrating a milestone. 30 episodes. Albo is celebrating 2.
100 days ago, on the 21st of May, the Australian people voted for a better future. We are determined to repay that trust by demonstrating a commitment to transparency and integrity, holding ourselves to a higher standard of behaviour than it's not illegal.
Yes, that's right. Labor's been in government for 100 days. That went quick, didn't it?
God,
Yeah.
I cannot believe it's been 100 days. Like, it feels like yesterday that you and I had our microscopes out and were just analysing every single second of Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese's election campaigns.
Right?
Yeah.
Remember ScoMo? Yes, 100 days. And so he gave a speech to the National Press Club this week, and these are some of the things that he racked up as his achievements so far. A 5.2% pay rise to the minimum wage, paid domestic violence leave, and the movement on the establishment of a federal ICAC. So these are the things he thinks are the biggest achievements so far. So, Georgie, what do you reckon? How has Albo and Labor done in their first 100 days?
I think they have been busy. Like, you heard Albo there saying a little earlier that, you know, we're having a crack. And I think they are having a crack. For the majority of the 100 days, I think that they have been very, very busy. He's had 1 week off. I think that was handled very well because everyone knew about it. And everyone was like, oh, yeah, well, I mean, he just had this extensive election campaign. I guess the guy deserves 7 days off. Sure. And we got to see, again, some of the key players within Labor come to the forefront. So Richard Marles, the deputy leader, Jim Chalmers has really taken the lead when it comes to any kind of economic policy and driving the conversation around wages growth, the upcoming jobs summit, creation of more jobs. And Penny Wong's been super busy too, because when you reflect on it, her and Albo have been in and out of the country quite a lot, trying to repair relationships with some of our closest neighbours. So overall, I think there's not too many missteps from Anthony Albanese and Labor. What do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree. I mean, they're obviously in the honeymoon period, right?
It's a long one though.
It has been a while.
Yeah.
And in this honeymoon period, I feel like they have the benefit of Australians kind of switching off.
Yes.
And they don't want to really be super engaged with federal politics at the
that's fair.
moment.
Yeah.
We've got other things to worry about.
Yeah.
So I think that they've done well. I feel like the temperature is turned down a lot on politics, where Albo probably just doesn't make as much news as ScoMo because his approach is less combative.
Yes.
I don't mind that.
What do you make of the now opposition leader, Peter Dutton's claims that, the Labor government are basically just acting as though they're in opposition? That seems to be the line now that the coalition is spurting out, being like, well, they wanted to be in government for so long, they're still acting like the opposition. I don't quite understand it.
Well, I think what he's getting to is the ScoMo ministry scandal.
Yes.
So I think that what he's saying is it's time for Labor to let go of that and just move on with the business of governing.
Right.
I think that's what they're trying to say.
Okay.
I'm not really super convinced by it because I do feel like Labor is on the front foot and does have quite a busy agenda of things that they want to get done. Coming up, there's like a jobs summit. They're quite committed to carbon reduction.
Yes.
There's a lot on their plate that they want to get done. So I don't really buy what he's got to say. But I think that the ScoMo stuff has been very interesting. So obviously that was huge news when it all started to come to light. We saw ScoMo back for press conferences, and there was that press conference that he did, and I was sort of like, oh, that's right. I remember what ScoMo was like as the PM.
Yeah, bulldozer.
The bulldozer. He was back and, again, making big headlines in a way that Albo doesn't. What reflections do you have on their different approaches, Albo versus ScoMo as PM?
I think I have an overarching sense of ease, which maybe didn't exist during the election campaign and previously. And I'm putting that solely down to Scott Morrison's nature in those press conferences. He was always up for a fight. He was always on the defensive and the attack. He somehow was able to do both. Therefore, the journalists were always on the defensive, trying to, bulldoze the bulldozer.
Yep.
And I think just from a viewer watching a lot of the time, I would get anxious about it because I was like, it's just at it was unsettling, I found. Whereas when Anthony Albanese is fronting press conferences now, I do see it slightly more of a conversation's not the right word. I don't think a press conference ever is a conversation between the journos and the politician, but maybe there's a little bit more opportunity for the journalists to actually ask probing questions. Whether or not Anthony Albanese actually answers them either.
He's still a
He's still a politician, so that's still up for debate. But I think he's got a lot better at, being able to bring in his deputies and his people who are working underneath him, like he did in the election campaign, not always well. I think he's got better at that. So I actually think that that's probably their nature in those moments, in those TV appearances, I've found to be far more relaxing, I guess.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's anywhere that Labor's dropped the ball?
The one thing that is still, I find I'm still coming to terms with and trying to get a good understanding of it, is their justification for the stage 3 tax cuts. I think that that's something that on the one hand, I can understand that they're like, we're just not going to worry about that. We went to the election with it as a policy. It's legislated. I understand. This being tax cuts, people who earn, I think it's $45,000 up to $200,000 will be taxed the same.
The same rate.
The same rate.
So what it essentially means is people who are well off get a pretty significant tax cut.
Yes. And I think right now, for the times that we're in now, with cost of living skyrocketing, fuel prices will be the next discussion because September's just around the corner. And I think that the policy itself for now doesn't really work anymore. It's a little bit outdated. And yes, it's been legislated, but as we've learned over the past, 3 years, we can easily change legislation, I think, or at least have it be a topic of conversation. So I'm not utterly convinced that Labor's handling it the best. Their messaging isn't as strong, I think, as they want it to be or think that it is.
Yeah, and I think it is hard to justify. So this was a coalition policy that they legislated, but Labor during the election said we endorse it and we will continue with it and we back it and we won't change it. So now they're in this position where it's not really core Labor business to give tax cuts to rich people.
Yeah.
But if they go back on their word, then they are the party of higher taxes, as the coalition likes to say. So it's a bit of a bind for them. I think they're hoping that it'll just go away, but journos are not allowing that because it is. I think it is a bit unfair.
Yeah. But and also the Teal Independents aren't really allowing that either. I know Monique Ryan, who ousted Josh Frydenberg, had a brain fade. Then I was like, what was his name? Former treasurer? Who was he? Yeah, Josh Frydenberg. She's been very vocal about being like, I just think it's a discussion that needs to be had again for where we are now. And so they're not letting it up. And I just think that this is just going to continue to plague Labor. Even, as far as like October, when I think they're going to do like a budget update, right?
They are.
Yeah. So that'll be
a full budget.
A full budget in October, yeah. So that'll be interesting to see where Jim Chalmers leads that.
Well, yes, and I think that you hit upon a good point as well. The thing I'm unsure about Labor's approach so far as well is just on the economy in general. And this has been another line of attack from the coalition. They've been saying they made some big promises during the last election. They promised to bring down power bills and make cost of living better and raise your wages and all that kind of stuff. And they're in a really, really difficult global economic environment where it's quite a task to make those meaningful changes to people's hip pockets. They haven't delivered yet, but I don't know that we've heard a lot of detail about how they will deliver on those promises yet. So I think that's going to remain a question mark over Jim Chalmers and Labor for a little while yet.
Where do you think they've done well?
I mean, again, what I like is that they have, it just feels a bit less combative, a bit more on with the job, a bit less scandalous.
Yeah. And that's what Anthony Albanese pledged, right? Like he wanted an end to conflict politics because everyone was fatigued.
Yeah, I know. I think that they're delivering on that. I think it does feel quite grown up and quite, not very combative, and they're just getting on with it. So long may it continue.
Yeah.
A scandal will come.
Oh,
don't you worry.
A scandal will come. I'm intrigued for what it is, to be honest. I don't know. I don't know what it would be. One note that I think that they have done very well, and it just goes to show, how quickly, again, talking about legislation, but how quickly things can change when you want them to change, and that was the Billawilla family getting permanent residency. That was a key marker, I think, throughout these first 100 days for the Labor government.
Yeah, and also I think that wage rise for the lowest paid people, for minimum wage holders, that was something they said, we're going to advocate for this, and then it happened. Yeah. So you've got to give them a tick for that.
Yeah, and they've still committed to the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We'll see where that goes. But I'm also incredibly intrigued to see what the first scandal is. Is there a secret ministries out there? Who would be the leader? Who is it?
Stay tuned. Remember, Flash Drivers, if you're loving the podcast, let us know. Subscribe and leave 5-star reviews. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. Everyone needs to be across the news of the week.
Moving on, and J-Law 2022 has been saved.
Taylor Swift is proving that she knows her fans all too well after her surprise album announcement.
Revealing her 10th album is actually titled Midnights and will feature 13 tracks. The album's inspired by sleepless nights scattered throughout Taylor's life.
Now, Georgie, I'm just going to allow you like about 10 seconds to just freak out about this news. Go.
Oh my actual God. Like, this is insane. I couldn't find it, but I was trying to find a recording that I sent to my two best girlfriends who are also Swifties when this news came out, because I was messaging you at the time about something else and I was like, stop everything. And the sound I recorded myself to send to them, and it was something like... for like 30 seconds. I'm not even kidding, and I'm not even embarrassed, because 2022 has been saved, J-Law.
So listeners need to understand that you're not just like a casual Taylor Swift fan.
No.
You're like a Swiftie or die.
That's right. I am of the belief, and my beliefs are facts, really, that Taylor Swift is the greatest musician of all time. And
big call.
It's a big call, and I stand by it, because she is just, I love her so, so much. So when this news came out at the VMAs, after she'd won like 1 million awards, and then she just casually dropped when she won for Video of the Year that, oh yeah, by the way, I've got a new album. And it isn't an album of re-recorded content. Like, it's not one of her Taylor's Versions albums, which everyone was waiting for. It is new content, 13 new songs. And of course it's 13.
Because that's her lucky number.
That's her lucky number.
So usually the Swiftie army
yes
has followed the clues and kind of knows when she's up to something.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong, nobody was predicting this, right?
No. Everyone was kind of predicting that there might be something, because anytime Taylor Swift rocks up at an event, you're like, hang on, why is she there? Because she's like both private and public. And whenever she goes public, you're like, there is meaning behind this. Why is she there? Her dress that she was wearing was giving Look What You Made Me Do video vibes from like years ago. It's with this like, it's like all crystals and it's like dripping off her. And it looked like when she was in the bath in that film clip. And everyone was like, she's announcing that she's redoing Look What You Made Me Do, because she is able to redo that song, re-record that song. She can't re-record the album Reputation yet. There's still another couple of months before she's allowed to do that.
I see.
Yeah. So everyone was like, she's announcing something to do with Reputation. That's what's happening. But my favourite theory at the moment is that the dress that she was wearing was actually an ode to this moment 13 years ago. 13 years ago, this happened.
Yo, Taylor, I'm really happy for you. I'm going to let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time. One of the best videos of all time.
My poor little Tay. 13 years ago, that happened to her. And the dress that she was wearing when that moment happened with Kanye West, very similar to the dress that she was wearing during this. And it's like, hang on, she knew that she was going to drop something big, because it's like an ode to exactly, marking the occasion of the 13 years since that moment happened at the same award show. Like, her mind.
But so for people who aren't as big fans as you are.
What are you doing?
Catch up.
Yes.
But what is it about her that like always generates headlines, but also like that garners this kind of fandom? Why do you think she is the best songwriter ever? And what is it? What's the special sauce with her?
I think that she appeals to me in particular because we're a similar age and we've grown up together. So all of her soon-to-be 10 albums came out at points in my life where she was going through similar things. It's like when I read the Harry Potter books and I'm like, I was the same age that Harry was in year 5 and then this happened to me, and it's like I'm living it, right? So it's easy for me to put myself into her songs and be like, oh, God, this just happened to me last week. Right. And now Taylor's written a song about it and it's great and I can shout it and I love it so much. And she is very poetic in terms of her songwriting because, one, they're so catchy. They're quite simple songs, like if you were going to learn them. But the imagery within all of them I think is really special, and that's what I don't think she actually gets enough credit for despite being a megastar. Do you like Taylor Swift?
Well, yeah. I mean, I got into her during lockdown with the 2 albums, surprise albums that she put out.
Yes.
Folklore and Evermore.
Correct.
They are great albums and show her as a very good songwriter. And I don't think you can deny that. And I think that she, there's a lot of people who who maybe had another look at her when those albums came out,
Yeah.
don't you think? Because,
Yeah.
you know, I think people kind of knew her as a country starlet and then maybe a
Yes.
pop star. And then those albums came out and you're like, oh, wow, there's a lot of depth here.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And just to reinforce just how much of a psycho Swiftie I am, like I wear a ring that I never take off that actually has Forevermore engraved on the inside of
know
it.
that.
Yeah. Let me show you. It's my signet ring. My two besties got it for me for my 30th birthday. See that? It says Forevermore in
Oh,
it.
that's nice.
Podcasters, listeners, I've just literally shown J-Lo my ring. And those albums, I've gone on record before, I think on this podcast, saying that they saved my life during lockdown because it was just like I was drowning and I was like, oh my God, Taylor, she knows. She always knows. She knows when I need her. And I think that it was just she's just so smart. Her marketing brain, like I know she has a team around her too, but I'm convinced that it is her as well. Like there's all talk at the moment because the album Midnights, her new album, comes out on October 21, which is Kim Kardashian's birthday. Like it's just genius.
But doesn't she need to get over this beef with
Why?
Kanye and Kim?
Why would she if it continues to generate headlines?
Yeah, but it's getting a bit much at this point, don't you think? Like I feel like she's prosecuted all this through her music and through receipts and all that kind of stuff. Like, get over it, Tay.
No, she could do what she couldn't do no wrong in my eyes. So she can hark back to it, but then just be open about her harking back to it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, look, Georgie.
Yes.
If I let you go on, this will become a 90-minute episode.
Yes.
So let's talk about some other moments from the VMAs.
Sorry, there were some other things happening at this award show. I mean, Lizzo looked amazing. She looked incredible. Little Nas X looked absolutely insane. If anyone hasn't seen a photo, Google immediately because he looked incredible. There was a really bizarre moment though that happened throughout the show, and I'm just gonna roll the tape.
I just want you guys to know that I'm available for birthdays, bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs, weddings, wakes, any old thing you need.
So that was the voice of Johnny Depp. Apparently, he was some kind of like hologram version of the moon person from the MTV Awards. Like that's what they're given. They win a moon person. Like why?
Yeah, I don't know.
Why?
I mean, I hadn't been wondering. I wasn't like really thinking about when's Depp's big comeback.
Yeah.
And then here it is in Moonman form.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. Like I know that there will have to be, well, have is a strong word, but I guess, there's going to be some kind of resurgence and redemption story for him following that incredibly highly publicized defamation suit against his ex-wife, Amber Heard. Is now the right time? Was the MTV Movie Awards, Video Music Awards, the setting for that? I'm not sure. I have heard on Twitter that some of the people in the crowd didn't actually see that. Like they didn't know that was happening. And so the cheers and stuff may have been added in post
really?
Because they were like, oh, we didn't really know what was happening. We weren't cheering for
they
that
were sort of
moment.
like, what's happening? Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he wasn't there, right? It was essentially a video
I don't
projection.
think so. Yeah, I think it was a
Right.
projection. Yeah,
Okay.
which just adds to the bizarreness of it for me.
Well, the thing is, like the VMAs has this long history of trying to be quite controversial and, following through a lot of the time. So there was the Taylor Swift Kanye moment. There was that moment with Miley Cyrus and
Oh my gosh, Robin Thicke.
Remember that?
The twerking. I'd forgotten.
twerking.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think that they quite like a few controversies in their awards show.
Right. Well, it gets everyone talking. I mean, we're talking about it now. Something else that happened, though, during the show, I know that you haven't heard this and I'm really excited to watch your reaction. But the Red Hot Chili Peppers were there. They were paying tribute to their lost bandmate, Taylor Hawkins, but they were also receiving what I think is akin to like a Lifetime Achievement Award. And when they were accepting it, one of the band members, Flea, this was part of his acceptance.
I love cockroaches and dirt and trees and every human being and the and the fish in it and deer antlers and love and everything that isn't love is cowardice. I love you. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you.
Lost me at the start. I came back at the end.
Well, that's Flea. Flea's a bit of a kook, right? He's a proud kook.
Yeah, okay.
And anyone who's watched one of their clips would probably have arrived at that
Yeah.
without hearing him speak.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
good on him. Get down with the cockroaches.
Getting down with the cockroaches. I mean, if anyone needs some PR, they do, don't they? Don't they? So they've got Flea.
They've got Flea.
They've got Flea.
Which would you prefer, a flea on you or a cockroach?
That in Flash Drive, episode 31.
Yeah, write in and tell us.
Main takeaway, Taylor Swift Midnight's TS10 is coming
We
out.
get it.
It's coming.
We get it. I mean,
it's coming, J-Lo.
you're not going to be able to
I
avoid
may
it.
not sleep. Like, I just will be in an eternal midnight. That could be fun. That'd be fun. Sleep deprivation, it could work. It could work. Tay, hey? Yeah, I'm willing.
This is a sickness.
Love hearing us chew the news fat and analyse the biggest and smallest headlines each week. Of course you do. So make sure you follow us on the socials so you don't miss any content. We're on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook and YouTube. Get on it. Now, J-Lo, our Flash drivers are probably expecting me to announce that we've got some Taylor Swift documentary or something coming up on the platform, but can't confirm that. But what can our listeners and viewers look forward to this week?
Yeah, so coming up on Flash on Sunday is going to be a really interesting debate about the Indigenous voice to Parliament. So for people who don't know, this is about the new idea to create a new voice to Parliament, essentially a consultative body that will be representative of the Aboriginal people, and the Parliament must consult with this body every time it makes laws that affect Aboriginal people. So we're all going to have to go to a referendum on this in a little while. So I think it's good for people to get across the issues. So on Sunday night on Sky News Australia, there's going to be a debate. Both sides represented, people for it and people against it, hosted by Chris Kenny, who's a Sky News commentator, and he's actually quite a fierce advocate for this change. So he's going to be on the pro side. There'll also be Marion Scrimgeour, an MP, and Dean Parkin, both in support of the voice, and then a couple of people speaking out against it, Liberal Senator Jacinta Price and Sky News host Andrew Bolt. So I think it'll be really interesting and good, like I say, for people to get across it. So it airs at 9 p.m. on Sunday on Sky News Australia, but of course with Flash you can catch up on it anytime.
J-Lo, that was episode 30 of Flash Drive.
We got to the end.
We got to the end and reviews are in already.
Talented, brilliant, incredible, amazing, show-stopping, spectacular, never the same, totally unique, completely not ever been done before.
Totally unique. Oh, she's off again. She's off again.
Now, Gaga said show-stopping,
Show-stopping.
and it's probably the right word because for the listeners who aren't aware, this will be Georgie's last episode of Flash Drive ever.
I know. J-Lo, please, hold back your tears. He's not crying, Flash Drive.
I might later. I might at the pub. So we're going to the pub on Friday to send Georgie off. But Georgie, tell everyone. So you're finishing up with Flash today for a great new opportunity. So people can still catch you, of course. Where are you going?
Yeah, I'm heading to the project full time, so it means I move back to Melbourne, and I'll be doing a mixture of feature reporting, breaking news reporting. If there's a natural disaster, you will see me in high vis. I'll be sent there, and some hosting as well on the show. But very sad, bittersweet, because Flash has just been so amazing. Thank you, everyone, for your support and for listening to us. Oh my God, shut up!
So for people listening, we've just got a nice bunch of flowers in here for Georgie to send her off.
Oh my God, I heard someone at the door and I was like, we have 2 minutes to go. Why is anyone coming here? Aw, thank you guys. That's so cute. Don't make me cry. I'm a hideous crier. I'm like, not good. No, absolutely. I've got mascara on. I blind myself.
So, Georgie, from all of us, we've really loved working with you. You're such a great presenter, such a fun person to be around in the newsroom. And, you know, for me, we've got you are. This is
modest.
where you be
Sorry.
quiet.
Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
But yeah, look, for me, genuinely, you know, especially doing Flash Drive as well is a real highlight of my week where we just get to stop and just talk crap together, which is always really fun. And yeah, look, we feel really lucky to have had you as part of Flash from the beginning, and we know you're going to go on to some really great stuff at the project and beyond. So thanks for everything.
Thanks, J-Lo. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Alain, who is our producer behind the scenes of Flash Drive. Guys, Flash Drivers, that's it. Catch you. J-Lo's back next week. I'm not, but I'm going to give J-Lo a hug right now with these beautiful flowers.
Come in for the hug. They can't hear the hug.
Crying. He's crying, guys.
He's sobbing.
He's sobbing. The weeping is too much. Oh, God.